What we have to recognize is we're not here to talk about religion and whether God is male and female or a lot of other things. What we're in here for, if you honestly believe it, is I want to get well. And I'm going to use this process to get well. That's the factor we want to zero in on. Do you want to get well? When you want to get well, any medicine is good. When I wanted to, and I really had to, I even appreciated castor oil. You have a bellyache strong enough. But my friend sat before me, and he made the point-blank declaration that God had done for him what he could not do for himself. His human will had failed. God has done for him what he could not do for himself. What is he saying in there? What's the second step? Came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. His human will had failed. Doctors had pronounced him incurable. Society was about to lock him up. Like myself, he had admitted complete defeat. Then he had in fact been raised from the dead, suddenly taken from the scrap heap to a level of life better than the best he had ever known. Had this power originated in him? Bill's asking a question. Here's the answer. Obviously it had not. There had been no more power in him than there was in me at that minute, and there was none at all. That's where we come to in AA. That's what the message is being delivered. You see, the first 4 chapters of this big book deal with steps 1 and 2. You don't go into the action steps until you come to chapter 5. And steps 1 and 2 are never with any directions in how you take step 1 or 2. Because step 1 and 2, all they give you is information to relate to, are conclusions that you come to in your own mind. We most probably would like to have most people come to these conclusions before they come to AA. That's why you come ready for treatment. I admit I'm powerless over alcohol, my life is unmanageable, and I believe that a power greater than myself is necessary for me to stay sober. You come to those conclusions in your head. You don't work those steps. What's the only test you can use to find out whether you're alcoholic or not? Drink. It's the only way you'll find out. This is not an educational process. You find out if you're alcoholic by drinking. If you never took a drink, you'd never know. And our past, don't say Finley told me to go out and drink now. You've got enough. I could tell just by looking at you guys you had enough. That floored me. It began to look as though religious people were right after all. Here was something at work in a human heart which had done the impossible. My ideas about miracles were drastically revised right then. Never mind the musty past. Here sat a miracle directly across the kitchen table. He shouted great tidings. I saw that my friend was much more than inwardly reorganized. He was on a different footing. His roots grasped a new soil. Despite the living example of my friend, there remained in me the vestiges of my old prejudice. The word God still aroused a certain antipathy. When the thought was expressed that there might be a God personal to me, this feeling was intensified. I didn't like the idea. I could go for such conceptions as creative intelligence, universal mind, or the spirit of nature, but I resisted the thought of a czar of the heavens, however loving his sway might be. I have since talked with scores of men who felt the same way. My friend suggested what then seemed a novel idea. He said, "Why don't you choose your own conception of God?" Why don't you choose your own conception of God? That is one of the most important facts about rehab. Why? That is the individual part of this program. The program is not individual. Your concept of a power greater than yourself is an individual choice. Nobody can tell you what that power is to be. That's the individuality of the program. And people have misconstrued that statement to say AA is an individual program. No, AA is not an individual program. If you choose a rock to be your higher power, then in the third step you turn your will and life over to a rock, if that makes sense to you. And the rest of the steps are designed to bring you closer to that power and have a religious or a spiritual experience or awakening. If your higher power is a tree, that's your conception. If your higher power is, if you're a Christian, is Christ, then that's your conception. If your higher power is the Muslim God, then that's your conception. If it's Buddha, then that's your conception. That is the individual part of this program. We have various beliefs in here, but we have one conclusion, that if you follow this process, you're going to come closer to that higher power and have an experience with it. That's our belief. That statement hit me hard. It melted the icy intellectual mountain in whose shadow I had lived and shivered many years. I stood in the sunlight at last. Now, very important. Bill's nervous when he writes it. Look at how scribbly he is. It was only a matter of being willing to believe in a power greater than myself. Only a matter to be willing to believe in a power greater than myself. Nothing more was required of me to make my beginning. What's the beginnings, the foundations of AA? A willingness to believe in a power greater than myself. That's all that's necessary. Doesn't say anything else. The whole basis of this foundation of recovery is based on willingness. I saw that growth could start from that point. Upon a foundation of willingness, I might build what I saw in my friend. Would I have it? Of course I would. Thus was I convinced that God is concerned with us humans when we want Him enough. At long last, I saw, I felt, I believed. Scales of pride and prejudice fell from my eyes. A new world came into view. The real significance of my experience in the cathedral burst upon me. For a brief moment, I had needed and wanted God. Remember in Winchester Cathedral? He's going overseas. He needed and wanted God. There had been a humble willingness to have Him with me, and He came. But soon the sense of His presence had been blotted out by what? Worldly clamors, environment, self-will. Mostly those within myself. And so it had been ever since, how blind I had been. See, most people who get into problems with self-will, it goes a little like this. Give me money, give me clothes, give me food, give me shelter, give me, but stay out of my life. Don't tell me where to go, when to go, who to go with, how to do it, or anything else. I'm running the show, but just give me the money necessary. That started about 15 at home with me. Just give me and I'll do the rest. Self-will, no control. Religion, family, everything out the window. Going to live life my way. At the hospital, I was separated from alcohol the last time. Treatment seemed wise, for I showed signs of delirium tremens. There I humbly offered myself to God as I then understood Him to do with me as He would. I placed myself unreservedly under His care and direction. What did He do there? Step 3. He took the third step that night. He's come to steps 1 and 2. He's taken the conclusions. Now he's turning his will and life over to the care of God. I ruthlessly faced my sins and ruthlessly faced my sins. What's that? 4th. And became willing to have my newfound friend take them away root and branch. What's that? 6 and 7. All right? My schoolmate visited me and I fully acquainted him with my problems and deficiencies. 5th step. We made a list of people I had heard or with whom I felt resentment. Step 8. I expressed my entire willingness to approach these individuals admitting my wrong. Never was I to be critical of them. I was to write all such matters to the utmost of my ability. Step 9. I was to test my thinking by the new God consciousness within me. Common sense would thus become uncommon sense. Step 10. I was to sit quietly when in doubt, asking only for direction and strength to meet my problems as He would have me. Step 11. Never was I to pray for myself except as my request bear my usefulness to others. Then only might I expect to receive, but that would be in great measure. My friend promised me when these things were done, I would enter upon a new relationship with my Creator, that it would have elements of a way of living which answered all my problems. Step 12. Belief in the power of God plus enough willingness, honesty, and humility to establish and maintain the new order of things were the essential requirements. Now, this next statement is one you hear so often in the program. Now let's clarify it, because you guys are going to have a lot of information with you. We don't want you to leave this facility and become like some Christians, Bible quoters. You're not just to quote the Bible, you're to live this program. And don't become a big book quoter. Well, on page 37, paragraph 2, line 6 says this. You got to live it. One of the things, the statements you hear in this program, did you ever hear this statement? This is a simple program, but it's not easy. Did you ever hear that? That is an incomplete statement. That statement is tied into another statement. Look in this paragraph. Read what it says. Simple, but not easy. A price had to be paid. It meant destruction of self-centeredness. I must turn in all things to the Father of light who presides over us all. Simple, but not easy. A price must be paid. The price is destruction of self-centeredness. In other words, what they're telling you in here is one of the four absolutes. You've got to get out of self. You've got to start being of service to other people. If those of you that are Christians, he who loses himself, what? Finds himself. All right? Do unto others as you have what? Others do unto you. In other words, you start becoming of service to other people. These were revolutionary and drastic proposals, but the moment I fully accepted them, the effect was electric. There was a sense of victory followed by such a peace and serenity as I had never known. There was utter confidence. I felt lifted as though the great clean wind of a mountaintop blew through and through. God comes to most men gradually, but his impact on me was sudden and profound. For a moment, I was alarmed and called my friend the doctor to ask if I were still sane. He listened in wonder as I talked. Finally, he shook his head, saying, "Something has happened to you I don't understand, but you had better hang on to it. Anything is better than the way you were." Was Bill Wilson the only one to have a spiritual experience? No. The good doctor now sees many men who have such experiences. Do you know why? They still believed that the steps could create this. Today, people mimic it. Oh, here comes God. I've heard them say that about people who talk about steps and spiritual experience. They ridicule them in a program today. Don't do that. There is not an individual sitting in this room this morning, male or female, who can't come in here at night or go to the chapel or be alone with another person and be sincere about the process they're going through that cannot have this spiritual experience. I have met several people. I have never had one. For some people it comes slowly. It says, I took the milk train route, you know. But I can tell you this is not the individual that came to AA standing up here. And that's what's going to happen in our lives. We're going to live differently. Quitting drinking is not the ending. That's the beginning. You must quit drinking to start working the program. Rarely have we seen a person fail who has sorely followed our path. Never have we seen a person succeed who continues to drink. You must not drink to start the program. The good doctor now sees many men who have such experiences. He knows they are real. While I lay in a hospital, the thought came that there were thousands of hopeless alcoholics who might be glad to have what have been so freely given me. Perhaps I could help some of them, and they in turn might work with others. Now, how many of you have been in treatment previously? Have any of you gone to Gorski's symptoms of relapse? Did you ever hear the symptoms of relapse? They're talking about all these relapses. AA has its symptoms of relapse that people know nothing about. And here's the first symptom of relapse, that this program tells you when you will drink if you don't do this. And let's get this down. And on the side, put on the side of this paragraph, first warning to drink. My friend had emphasized the absolute necessity of demonstrating these principles in all my affairs. Particularly was it imperative to work with others as he had worked with me. What's he talking about? 12-step work. Faith without works was dead, he said, and how appallingly true for the alcoholic. For if an alcoholic failed to perfect and enlarge his spiritual life through work and self-sacrifice for others, he could not survive the certain trials and low spots ahead. If he did not work, he would surely drink again, and if he drank, he would surely die, and faith would be dead indeed. With us, it is just like that. The first warning in this program tells me that if I don't become of service to others and carry the message of Alcoholics Anonymous, I'm going to drink. And it does not say, but if I'm at an AA meeting, it's all right, I don't have to do this. Now, don't leave this room saying Finley says meetings are not important. They are very important. I'll bring that out later. But what I'm telling you also, it's giving you a program of action, and it's telling you what you're learning you share with others. That's the first requirement to stay clean. Does a spiritual experience keep you sober? If you have the flashing lights in the wind and everything, does that keep you sober? No. It may help you confirm a belief in a power greater than yourself. And that's where the corridor pass. My wife and I abandoned ourselves with enthusiasm to the idea of helping other alcoholics to a solution of their problems. I was fortunate, for my old business associates remained skeptical for a year and a half, during which I found little work. A year and a half sober, Bill's not finding a job. So don't think you're unique. I was not too well at the time and was plagued by waves of self-pity and resentment. Bill's suffering these things. Then this sometimes nearly drove me back to drink. But I soon found that when all other measures failed, work with another alcoholic would save the day. He didn't say get down on my knees and say a prayer to be released. He said work with another alcoholic will save the day. Many times I have gone to my old hospital in despair. On talking to a man there, I would be amazingly lifted up and set on my feet. It is a design for living that works in rough going. What is a design for living that works in rough going when you're tempted to use? Yeah. Does it tell you go to a meeting and it's going to leave you? No, it does not. The fellowship is a support. But when it comes to this critical point in my life where I'm deciding whether I'm going to use again, what's going to happen to me? I better go out and work with somebody else, and I find out by talking to somebody else the desire to use alcohol leaves me. Thank you. We commenced to make many fast friends, and a fellowship has grown up among us, which is a wonderful thing to feel a part. The joy of living we really have, even under pressure and difficulty. I have seen hundreds of families set their feet in a path that really goes somewhere. I have seen the most impossible domestic situations righted, feuds and bitterness of all sorts wiped out. I have seen men come out of asylums to resume a vital place in the lives of their families and communities. Business and professional men have regained their standing. There is scarcely any form of trouble and misery which has not been overcome among us. In one western city and its environments, there are 1,000 of us in our families. We meet frequently so that newcomers may find the fellowship they seek. At these informal gatherings, one may often see from 50 to 200 persons. We are growing in numbers and power. An alcoholic in his cups is an unlovely creature. Our struggles with them are variously strenuous, comic, and tragic. One poor chap committed suicide in my home. He could not or would not see our way of life. There is, however, a vast amount of fun about it all. I suppose some would be shocked at our seeming worldliness and levity. But just underneath there is deadly earnestness. Faith has to work 24 hours a day in and through us or we perish. Most of us feel we need look no further for utopia. We have it with us right here and now. Each day, my friend's simple talk in our kitchen multiplies itself in a widening circle of peace on earth and goodwill to men. And I told you yesterday, every day an individual goes out on a 12-step call. That's Bill Wilson and Dr. Bob doing the same thing from the very beginning. This thing called Alcoholics Anonymous is a power. It's a gift for those who want to accept it. There are some people, I believe it's something like they say that only 1 out of every 37 people who need it will get an opportunity for treatment and AA. Only 1 out of 37. We're still only scratching the surface. But if you believe you want a new way of life, you can see what happened to one of the co-founders. It can happen to you also. You're going to learn some things in here about alcoholism. You're also going to learn about the fact that this is not an individual program. And you're going to help understand and come to the fact that we need a power greater than ourselves to recover. We of Alcoholics Anonymous, who are the we of Alcoholics Anonymous that they're speaking about? The first 100. We always have to keep that in mind. That is not the membership of AA today. This is the we of Alcoholics Anonymous, the original members who wrote the book. No, thousands of men and women who were once just as hopeless as Bill, nearly all have what? Recovered. It doesn't say nearly all are recovering. How did we ever get that word recovering into the program of AA? I asked a sponsor of mine who was here years ago. He came in 1941. He said, Bill, he said, some of the guys in here went out and slipped and they came back in and they said that the reason they slipped is because they thought they were recovered and they could drink again. And he said, so now they start saying, well, I never can drink again, so now I'm recovering. Well, with that, a lot of people start hearing recovering at meetings, and they start thinking in terms of recovering as if you're never recovered. If you remain recovering, you're probably going to have white-knuckle sobriety. You're always going to be fighting booze or whatever it is you're in here for. If you've recovered, you're going to have the spiritual experience that's going to release you from the desire to drink alcohol. That's what you want. And we're going to cover that, and it's described in after step 10. And you'll see how clear that becomes then. Nearly all have recovered. They have solved the drink problem. Not all their other problems. The drink problem has been solved. We are average Americans. All sections of this country and many of its occupations are represented, as well as many political, economic, social, and religious backgrounds. We are people who normally would not mix. But there exists amongst us a fellowship, a friendliness, and an understanding which is indescribably wonderful. We are like passengers on a great liner the moment after rescue from shipwreck, when camaraderie, joyousness, and democracy pervade the vessel from steerage to captain's table. What is steerage in a ship? That's down in the very bottom. The captain's table is where the elite sat. And it's saying as a result of this boat fiasco that they were in, and they were rescued, camaraderie prevails. There's no class distinctions there. It's like recovery from alcoholism. When it gets bad enough, we recover from alcoholism. We have camaraderie and fellowship here. All right? Unlike the feelings of the ship's passengers, however, our joy in escape from disaster does not subside as we go our individual ways. Why? They're not having a boat wreck every day. They're not having a sinking every day. But we're dealing with alcoholics every day. The feeling of having shared in a common peril is one element in the powerful cement which binds us. But that in itself would never have held us together as we are now joined. The tremendous fact, and underline this paragraph, the tremendous fact for every one of us is that we have discovered a common solution. It does not say an individual solution. Let's stick with the black print. We have discovered a common solution. That means we can all use this. We have a way out on which we can absolutely agree, and upon which we can join in brotherly and harmonious action. This is the great news this book carries to those who suffer from alcoholism. An illness of this sort, and if we have come to believe it an illness, involves those about us in a way no other human sickness can. Now you notice it doesn't say disease in here, because it was so radical at the time for these people to start coming out with alcoholism as a disease rather than a moral issue, a lack of willpower. They didn't want to be too heavy. So instead of saying disease, they said illness, to start getting the point across. The whole major thrust of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous has been to get the population to accept this illness, all right, as a little bit more than a matter of willpower. If a person has cancer, all are sorry for him and no one is angry or hurt. But not so with the alcoholic illness. For with it there goes the annihilation of all things worthwhile in life. It engulfs all whose lives touch the sufferers. It brings misunderstanding, fierce resentment, financial insecurity, disgusted friends and employers, warped lives of blameless children, sad wives and parents. Anyone can increase the list. This paragraph probably leads more to the misunderstanding or the clearance of misunderstanding by a lot of the spouses of alcoholics or family members. You know, there's an organization out there that deals with children. We know what organization that is, and they deal with these issues of the behavior of the alcoholic. I'm separated from my first wife, I don't know how many years, but to this day, I still yet believe that she does not think that my behavior was as a result of my alcoholism. She still believes that everything that occurred in our lives, I did intentionally. I'm a mean, egotistical son of a gun or something. Do you know why? We have not done a very good job of selling the population in our country that this is an illness. You see, my alcoholism determines my behavior. My behavior does not determine my alcoholism. My alcoholism will determine my behavior. I have to understand this. And each time a person stands up here and tells a group of alcoholics his or her character defects made him or her an alcoholic, we defeat this. Now we're saying it's a matter of intention. We're drinking to relieve a condition. If you are drinking to relieve a condition, that is choice. See? If you're drinking because you're shy, and if you drink you're not shy anymore, then you're drinking by choice. But when you have alcoholism, you will be drinking when you don't want to. Am I getting that point across? This is an illness. This illness will determine my behavior. We hope this volume will inform and comfort those who are or may be affected. There are many. Highly competent psychiatrists who have dealt with us found it sometimes impossible to persuade an alcoholic to discuss his situation without reserve. Strangely enough, parents, wives, parents, and intimate friends usually find us even more unapproachable than do the psychiatrist and the doctor. Again, this is very important. Bill's shaking over it, right? But the ex-problem drinker who has found what? This solution. This solution is singular. It does not say these solutions. It's not plural. This solution. But the ex-problem drinker who has found this solution, the one the founders are speaking about, who is properly armed with facts about who? Himself, not about you, can generally win the entire confidence of another alcoholic in a few hours. Until such an understanding is reached, little or nothing can be accomplished. One alcoholic to another. What happened when Bill Wilson went over to see Dr. Bob in Akron, Ohio? Dr. Bob was in the Oxford movement about 2 years. Bill Wilson was only in 6 months. In 6 months, Bill Wilson staying sober. In 2 years, Dr. Bob's getting drunk. What is Bill Wilson doing that Dr. Bob is not? Bill Wilson is helping other alcoholics and telling everybody what's wrong with them. Dr. Bob's hiding it. He's keeping it to himself. He's not sharing it. See? And what happened when Bill Wilson, who has nothing to do with medicine, goes over and sees Dr. Bob? He gives him this solution, the doctor's opinion. And Dr. Bob says to Bill Wilson, the non-medical man, "You are the first man who has ever understood me. You are the first man who has ever understood me. Why? Everybody else is telling him, use your will, Doc. Use your willpower, Doc. Why? They didn't have a problem with alcohol. You know how they state that in AA, don't you? In regards to alcoholism, compare it to a man who drinks a pint of castor oil, and then when it starts working, use your willpower. See if you can prevent it. You can't. That's exactly with us in booze, all right? That the man who is making the approaches had the same difficulty, that he obviously knows what he is talking about, and his whole deportment shouts at the new prospect that he's a man with a real answer, that he has no attitude of holier than thou, nothing whatever except the sincere desire to be helpful, that there are no fees to pay, no axes to grind, no people to please, no lectures to be endured except mine. These are the conditions we have found most effective. After such an approach, many take up their beds and walk again. None of us makes a sole vocation of this work. What work? 12-step work. Not working with alcoholics, because you get a little confused there. There are some people in AA who say, I don't believe a person that's an alcoholic should be a two-hatter. So what do you mean? Well, if you come in AA, we don't believe you should be a counselor. I said, oh, because I run a few treatment programs. And I said, well, you also told me that if you're not an alcoholic, you can't work with another alcoholic because you didn't understand it. He says, that's right. I said, you've eliminated the field. Nobody can work in it. That's how ridiculous some statements become in AA. Listen to what he said. I don't believe AA should be counselors. And if you're not an alcoholic, then you can't be a counselor because you don't understand disease. There's no field. You have to break down a lot of what's said in here. None of us makes the sole vocation of this work, nor do we think its effectiveness would be increased if we did. We feel that elimination of our drinking is what? A beginning. It's not the ending. Not drinking is not the ending, it's the beginning. A much more important demonstration of our principles lies before us in our respective homes, occupations, and affairs. All of us spend much of our spare time in a sort of effort which we are going to describe. A few are fortunate enough to be so situated that they give nearly all of their time to the work. If we keep on the way we are going, there's little doubt that much good will result, but the surface of the problem would hardly be scratched. Those of us who live in large cities are overcome by the reflection that close by, hundreds are dropping into oblivion every day. Many could recover if they had the opportunity we have enjoyed. How then shall we present that which has so freely been given us? There's a question. What they're saying is we're only scratching the surface. We know there's hundreds of thousands of alcoholics out there who are not getting any service. They're not getting the message we have to deliver, and they're asking a question. How can we help them recover? There is no AA at this time. You understand that when this book started being written in 1937, there was 40 alcoholics sober. When this book is printed in 1939, there's only 100 alcoholics sober. Akron, Cleveland, and New York. So there's 100 people. How are they going to get the message across? There's no meetings like this. Here's the answer. They're saying if we want to get this message across, here's the answer. We have concluded to publish an anonymous volume setting forth the problem as we see it. We shall bring to task our combined experience and knowledge. This suggests a useful program for anyone concerned with a drinking problem. In other words, they published a book. The Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous expanded and grew, not by alcoholics going door to door and saying, do you have a drinking problem? It expanded through the publication of this book. The man in California with a drinking problem couldn't call up Akron and say, Dr. Bob, come and see me. I have an alcohol problem. But the people who read this book and followed its instructions were able to recover by the directions in here and start sharing it with others, and the fellowship grew. The first sponsor that went national, right here. You know what the only difference is between then and now? That's all they had. So they accepted it. You didn't have somebody standing over your back saying to you, you don't have to read the big book, you don't have to do those steps, you don't have to do this, just do what I did. There's the big difference. Now, one of the things Bill Wilson wrote about when he was writing about the big book, he states in here why they wrote the big book. And he says the number of alcoholics in the world who wanted to get well, we reckoned, was in millions. How could the great chance we had be brought to them? At the snail's pace we had been going, it was clear that most of them could never be reached. We could therefore no longer be a seldom heard of secret society. Word of mouth communication with the few alcoholics we could contact by our then current methods would not be only slow but dangerous. Because the recovery message in which we now had such high confidence might soon be garbled, you know what he's saying? People passing it on by word of mouth, the message is getting garbled and twisted beyond recognition. Clearly, our budding society and its message would have to be publicized in a book. And Lois wrote in her statement, and I don't know where that book went, it was Lois Remembers. Here it is. Why they wrote the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. I thought I had it marked off here. But she writes in here, page 107 and 108, I'd like to read this to you. Exactly what she says. That's what a lot of people in AA don't know. It's always good to read conference-approved literature. He and Bob assessed the current status of the movement. They were surprised to find that although many of those they had worked with had fallen by the way, 40 members enjoyed an average of 2 years solid sobriety. This was flabbergasting, awe-inspiring. 40 people impressed them. They really had hit on a program for helping alcoholics. Now they saw it could develop into something tremendous if it was not diluted or garbled by word of mouth, as one person passed it on to another. Suppose a book was published to explain the program and give stories of how individuals attained sobriety. Wouldn't that offer many more alcoholics an opportunity to follow suit? And wouldn't it save the program from distortion? Both Bob and Bill and their 40 cohorts could never hope to reach the number of prospects that a book could. In the history, they're telling you why the book was written. And I will tell you what has happened today. I write a story, and I give it to him to read. After he reads the story, I take it back from him, and I tell him to tell the story to the next man, and the next man, and the next man. It goes all the way around this room, and it finishes up over here with John. And then I tell John, now you write down the story as you heard it. And John writes down the story as he heard it. I read the original story that I gave to him, and I read the one that was passed verbally through this room, and they know we compare. That's what's happened to the message of Alcoholics Anonymous. The program of AA has been rewritten verbally in the communication from one to another. And I must state at this time, unintentionally, a lot of treatment centers did this. They did not know what the message of Alcoholics Anonymous was, and they went psychology orientated. And as a result, we lost a lot of the message of AA. And I told you, those two guys who go around the country, Joe and Charlie, they've done a lot. Big book discussions, big book meetings. I think the pendulum is swinging back toward AA. Spirituality is coming back to AA heavier than it ever has. And much to the dismay of many people, it's probably because a lot of people are coming in with drug issues, and they find out that spirituality is really necessary for them to recover. Fellowship doesn't work for them. A lot of AAs don't like to hear that, but it's the truth. Where was I? Of necessity, there will have to be discussion of matters medical, psychiatric, social, and religious. We are aware that these matters are from their very nature controversial. Nothing would please us so much as to write a book which would contain no basis for contention or argument. We shall do our utmost to achieve that ideal. Most of us sense that real tolerance of other people's shortcomings and viewpoints and the respect for their opinions are attitudes which make us more useful to others. Those are qualities we try to develop. Our very lives as ex-problem drinkers depend upon our constant thought of others and how we may help meet their needs. What does our very lives as ex-problem drinkers depend upon? Our constant thought of others. Get out of self. That's what they're talking about. Get out of self. The person who comes to AA and says, I'm sick, fix me, I'm sick, fix me, stays sick. The person who comes here and says, I have a solution to help others and goes out and helps others, forgets their own problems and gets well. That's a capsulated form of it. That's exactly what happens. Forget self. You may have already asked yourself why it is that all of us became so very ill from drinking. Doubtless you are curious to discover how and why, in the face of expert opinion to the contrary, we have what? Recovered from a hopeless condition of mind and body. If you are an alcoholic who wants to get over it, you may already be asking, what do I have to do? If you're asking the question, what do I have to do to recover? Here's the answer to the question. It is the purpose of this book to answer such questions specifically. It means right on target. We shall tell you what we have done. Before going into a detailed discussion, it would be well to summarize some points as we see them. Now, if any of these statements have been made to you, you're probably in the right place. How many times have people said to us, I can take it or leave it alone? Why can't he? Why don't you drink like a gentleman or quit? That fellow can't handle his liquor, why don't you try beer and wine? Lay off the hard stuff. His willpower must be weak. He could stop if he wanted to. She's such a sweet girl, I should think he'd stop for her sake. The doctor told him if he ever drank again, it would kill him, but there he is, all lit up again. Now, these are commonplace observations on drinking, which we hear all the time. Underline this. Back of them is a world of ignorance and misunderstanding. We see that these expressions refer to people whose reactions are very different from ours. What are we talking about? We're talking about what happens in this chart. People are not aware of the physical part of our illness nor the mental obsession. They can't be because they don't have it. My brothers in my family have made those statements to me repeatedly, time and time again. Now, I resent the fact that I had to come to AA and somebody sit down and tell me I could quit drinking if I wanted to. All I had to do was be honest about my alcoholism. I came to AA and that's what I was told. Take the first step, be honest about it, and you won't drink no more. I did that repeatedly throughout my life, and I could not stay sober. Now we're going to describe three types of drinkers here, and this is going to get some clarification for you for the fellowship as to why some people can stay sober without a program. This is going to clear it up for you. Moderate drinkers have little trouble in giving up liquor entirely. If they have good reason for it, they can take it or leave it alone. They're on this side here. They're right there. Those are the people that have no trouble metabolizing alcohol. None whatsoever. My family's loaded with those type of people. They used to look at me like I was a freak. You know. The second type of drinker. This is probably a percentage of the population today. These are what we consider a hard drinker. Let's look at his description. Then we have a certain type of hard drinker. He may have the habit badly enough gradually to impair him physically and mentally. It may cause him to die a few years before his time. If it's sufficiently strong reason, ill health, falling in love, change of environment, or the warning of a doctor becomes operative, this man can also stop or moderate, although he may have it difficult and troublesome and may even need medical attention. That guy's going to be just like an alcoholic. I met one Saturday walking his dog. He came into the program with me in 1961. And I said to him, "My Steve, you haven't been to meetings for how many years?" He said, "Bill, I didn't need the meetings. I just got off the sauce, got away from my buddies, and that's all I needed." You see, he was with a drinking crowd. He broke away from the crowd, abstained from alcohol, and he was all right. I could never do that. We're going to describe that individual, the guy who comes in here because he's afraid he's going to lose his wife or get fired or lose a job. He can do that if he's a hard drinker. But let's look at this next guy. But what about the real alcoholic? You ever hear a guy stand up and say, when he leads now, "My name is Bill so-and-so, I'm a real alcoholic"? You know why he's saying that? He's telling you that the description of a real alcoholic fits him. He's a man who has to go through the recovery process, or woman. We have to go through the recovery process. We have to treat our alcoholism or we're going to relapse. But what about the real alcoholic? He may start off as a moderate drinker. Remember, we cover that. Progression. He may start off as a moderate drinker. But at some stage of his drinking career, he begins to lose all control of his liquor consumption. When? Once he starts to drink. Doesn't say he has to drink every day. Alcoholism is not daily drinking. It's what happens to me after I start, what happens to me after I take the first drink. We talked about allergies this morning, and we talked about an allergy to strawberries. What happens to a person that has allergy to strawberries? They get a rash and hives. So the guy doesn't know what it comes from. He puts an allergy patch on his arm. Doctor takes it off. He says, "Hey, Joe, you're allergic to strawberries. You can't eat them." And the guy says, "Well, Doc, I only eat strawberries once a year." What does the doctor say? "Well, then you can't be allergic to them. You have to eat strawberries every day to be allergic to them." He says, "Don't eat the strawberries." You don't have the rash and hives, right? When you have the allergy to alcohol, don't take the first drink. You'll never set off the phenomenon of craving or allergic reaction. The whole basis of AA, don't take the first drink. Here's the fellow who's been puzzling you, especially in his lack of control. He does absurd, incredible, tragic things while drinking. He's a real Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. He is seldom mildly intoxicated. He is always more or less insanely drunk. His disposition while drinking resembles his normal nature but little. If you guys don't know what they're talking about over there, just go over and talk to Tony. He can explain it all to you. He may be one of the finest fellows in the world, yet you let him drink for a day and he frequently becomes disgustingly and even dangerously antisocial. He has a positive genius for getting tight at exactly the wrong moment, particularly when some important decision must be made or engagement kept. He is often perfectly sensible and well-balanced concerning everything except liquor, but in that respect he is incredibly what? Dishonest and selfish. Remember, they're talking to you about getting honest with yourself? They're speaking in regards to alcohol, especially. Because when it comes to alcohol, we become incredibly dishonest and selfish. We don't even like to share after a while. You know, there was a period of time I passed a brown bag around. After that, I didn't pass it. I just keep it to myself, drink from somebody else's and get mine alone. He often possesses special abilities, skills, and aptitudes and has a promising career ahead of him. He uses his gifts to build up a bright outlook for his family and himself and then pulls the structure down on his head by a senseless series of sprees. All right, you know what's happening here? The guy who comes into AA, sobers up for a week, was going to lose his wife, or the wife was going to lose her husband, stays clean, starts becoming everything they expect, takes on 2 jobs, gets a lot of money, and the family said, "Boy, we got it whooped now." And all of a sudden, comes home, he's drunk again. He builds up the faith and the trust of the family, and slaps him across the face again by a sense of sprees. He is the fellow who goes to bed so intoxicated he had to sleep the clock around. Yet early next morning he searches madly for the bottle he misplaced the night before. If he can afford it, he may have liquor concealed all over his house to be certain no one gets his entire supply away from him to throw down a waste pipe. As matters grow worse, he begins to use a combination of high-powered sedative and liquor to quiet his nerves so he can go to work. Then comes a day when he simply cannot make it and gets drunk all over again. He's gone to the advanced stages of alcoholism. Perhaps he goes to a doctor who gives him morphine or some sedative with which to taper off. Then he begins to appear at hospitals and sanitariums. This is by no means a comprehensive picture of true alcoholics, as our behavior patterns vary, but this description should identify him roughly. They're giving him morphine. Think you can become addicted to morphine? You sure can. Second World War proved that. A lot of people who in the Second World War and the First World War who had pain and wounds, they gave them morphine. You know what they found out? A percentage of the people taking morphine were becoming addicted to it. Not all of them, but a percentage of them. So they went to their laboratories and they developed a sister drug to morphine that was going to solve the morphine addiction problem. And the sister drug, they named it heroin. The heroine, the sister drug to morphine. We're going to wipe out morphine addiction. Now we're going to give them heroin. They found out people became addicted to heroin, so they came to the laboratories and they came out with another one, and they took all the heroin addicts down to 55th Street in Cleveland to the clinic, and they gave them what? Methadone. Now I don't know what they're going to come up with next. That's why Alcoholics Anonymous says can't use any alcohol whatsoever, beer, wine, whiskey, cough syrup if it's it, or mind-altering chemicals. It's the same. This is by no means a comprehensive picture of the true alcoholic, as our behavior patterns vary, but this description should identify him roughly. Now here's the questions. Why does he behave like this? This is a question. If hundreds of experiences have shown him that one drink means another debacle with all its attendant suffering and humiliation, why is it he takes one drink? That's what my family was asking me, exactly what's in this book. Why? Why can't he stay on the water wagon? Why not? The water wagon. Going on a wagon is the next vehicle to the next drunk. What has become of the common sense and willpower he still sometimes displays with respect to other matters? Those are all questions. Here comes the answer to the questions. Perhaps there never will be a full answer to these questions. Opinions vary considerably as to why the alcoholic reacts differently from normal people. We are not sure why once a certain point is reached, little can be done for him. We cannot answer the riddle. They don't even get involved in a whys. All AA says, if it's happening to you, forget the whys, let's get into the treatment. You know, alcoholism is probably the only disease in the world where when you go for treatment, they spend more time in telling you how they got the disease than they spend in the recovery process. You ever think of that? You go into a hospital for a heart attack, you don't want them to spend 6 weeks telling you how you got a heart attack. What do you want to do? How do I get it fixed? How do I get well? You go to treatment for alcoholism, you want to spend 6 weeks telling you how you became an alcoholic. What do I have to do not to be alcoholic? That's recovery. That's what we all have in common. See, an overeater, a drug addict, a CA, an NA, an OA, an FA, and a GA, and whatever other kind of AA there is, the directions are the same for the steps. The problem is not the solution. The program is. You can talk problem from now to doomsday and never get well. We know that while the alcoholic keeps away from drink as he may do for months or years, he reacts much like other men. We are equally positive that once he takes any alcohol, whatever, into his system, something happens both in the bodily and mental sense which makes it virtually impossible for him to stop. The experience of any alcoholic will abundantly confirm this. These observations would be academic and pointless if our friend never took the first drink, thereby setting the terrible cycle in motion. Therefore, the main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind rather than in his body. If you ask him why he started on that last bender, the chances are he will offer you any one of 100 alibis. Sometimes these excuses have a certain plausibility, but none of them really make sense in the light of the havoc an alcoholic's drinking bout creates. They sound like the philosophy of the man who, having a headache, beats himself on the head with a hammer so he can't feel the ache. If you draw this fallacious reasoning to the attention of an alcoholic, he will laugh it off or become irritated and refuse to talk. Once in a while, he may tell the truth, and the truth, strange to say, is usually he has no more idea why he took the first drink than you have. I'll confirm that. With all of the problems and issues I had to deal with, which would occur if I took a drink again, I could not tell you why I took another drink when I knew what the results would be. That's part of our insanity. Some drinkers have excuses with which they are satisfied part of the time, but in their hearts they really do not know why they do it. Once this melody, and that's not a song, that means illness. Once this melody has a real hold, they are a baffled lot. There is the obsession that somehow, someday they will beat the game, but they often suspect they are down for the count. What is an obsession of the mind? It's a thought that has no opposing point of view. An obsession has no opposing point of view. An obsession is in your head and that's it. Can't sway it. How true this is, few realize. In a vague way, their families and friends sense that these drinkers are abnormal, but everybody hopefully awaits the day when the sufferer will rouse himself from his lethargy and assert his power of will. The tragic truth that if the man be a real alcoholic, the happy day may not arrive. He has lost the power of control. At a certain point in the drinking of every alcoholic, this is very important, he passes into a state where the most powerful desire to stop drinking is of absolutely no avail. This tragic situation has already arrived in practically every case long before it is suspected. We have lost the power of choice. We're not drinking now for reasons that we think we're drinking. Here's something that a lot of people thought was new when they went to treatment centers, euphoric recall. The fact is that most alcoholics, for reasons yet obscure, have lost the power of choice in drink. Our so-called willpower becomes practically non-existent. We are unable at certain times to bring into our consciousness with sufficient force the memory of the suffering and humiliation of even a week or a month ago. We are without defense against the first drink. In other words, what they're saying is we cannot remember pain. You know, they said if the human brain could retain pain, a woman would never get pregnant over once. All right? We cannot retain pain. What happens to us when it comes to alcohol and using alcoholic is euphoria, euphoric recall, just like what happened to Bill Wilson. He thinks of the good times. We can't remember the pain. That's why we repeat the behavior. Myself, and this is a little bit of self-disclosure, I called my uncle to come and get me out of jail on the DWI. And when he came and took me out, he was with the neighbor man, and we were walking down the steps of the jailhouse. And he said to me, he said, well, Bill, you're out. I said, yes, let's go across the street and have a beer. And he stopped dead in his tracks. He looked at me, he said, my God, don't you understand what got you in there? There it comes, alcohol right back on my mind again. I have to think about it. I'm not choosing it. It comes automatically. Euphoria. It's where I was talking about the aspirins. See? Think of something terrible in your life. Something that really was traumatic and it affected you. And 10 years later you can talk about it and laugh. Think about the really painful things that happened to you as a child when you were in school and now you laugh at them. You've outgrown them, right? See? The pain. We can't remember that. That's what happens to us with alcohol. You know, I think one of them guys on the tape said, our national anthem, I'll never do it again. I'll never do it again. The almost certain consequences that following taking even a glass of beer do not crowd into mind to deter us. These thoughts occur, they are hazy and readily supplanted with the old threadbare idea that this time we shall handle ourselves like other people. There is a complete failure of the kind of defense that keeps one from putting his hand on a hot stove. The alcoholic may say to himself in the most casual way, it won't burn me this time, so here's how. And after the third or fourth, pounded on a bar and said to ourselves, for God's sake, how did I ever get started again? Only to have that thought supplanted by, we'll stop with the sixth drink, or what's the use anyhow? I can relate to that. Sitting in a bar room asking myself, just like this, how did I ever get started again? How did this happen? Now this only occurs to people who are trying to quit. People who are enjoying their lifestyle and they like what's happening in their life, AA is not going to make sense. If there's still fun and games in what you're doing, this is a mystery to you. All right? When this sort of thinking is fully established in an individual with alcoholic tendencies, he probably placed himself beyond human aid. It's telling you again, power greater than ourselves. And unless locked up, may die or go permanently insane. These stark and ugly facts have been confirmed by legions of alcoholics throughout history. But for the grace of God, there would have been thousands more convincing demonstrations, so many want to stop but cannot. There is a solution. If this is happening in your life and you really believe you want to change it, there is a solution. Almost none of us like the self-searching, what's that? Inventory. The leveling of our pride, the confession of shortcomings which the process requires for a successful consummation. But we saw that it really worked in others, and we had to come to believe in the hopelessness and futility of life as we had been living it. When therefore we were approached by those in whom the problem had been solved, there was nothing left for us but to pick up the simple kit of spiritual tools that are laid at our feet. There is no such thing as AA tools. There's no such thing as the tools of AA. They are always referred to as a kit of spiritual tools. And you notice you have to pick up the tools and use them. I got a toolbox at home. Those tools have never walked to a job and took care of the job themselves. I had to pick up and use the tools. That's exactly in AA. You don't come in here and sit in a chair and the tools will work for you sitting there. You have to start using the tools. The kit of spiritual tools. We have found much of heaven, and we have been rocketed into a fourth dimension of existence of which we had not even dreamed. Remember we covered that in Bill's story? Fourth dimension of existence, spiritual experience or awakening. The great fact is just this and nothing less, that we have had deep and effective spiritual experiences which have revolutionized our whole attitude toward life, toward our fellows, and toward God's universe. The central fact of our lives today is the absolute certainty that our Creator has entered into our hearts and lives in a way which is indeed miraculous. There is a solution, deals with a power greater than yourself. He has commenced to accomplish those things for us which we could never do by ourselves. I go through the steps to allow God to do for me what I can't do for myself. If you, that's talking to you, if you are as seriously alcoholic, we believe there is no middle-of-the-road solution. And when a lot of guys come up to me and they say, Bill, I never read the big book, I never did the steps, I never did any of this, I said, yes. The big book speaks of fellows like you. They say it does. I said, yes. It says you're not as seriously alcoholic as the founders were. It says if you're as seriously alcoholic as we were, we believe there is no middle-of-the-road solution. In other words, you can't walk just in fellowship. If you're a real alcoholic, you need the program. We were in a position where life was becoming impossible, and if we have passed into the region from which there is no return through human aid, we had but one of two alternatives. One was to go on to the bitter end, blotting out the consciousness of our intolerable situation as best we could, and the other to accept spiritual help. In other words, here's alcohol, my power greater than myself, here's God. Which am I going to take? This we did because we honestly wanted to and were willing to make the effort. Now this page 26 and 27 are the foundations of recovery in AA. It's going to tell us who gave us the idea for Alcoholics Anonymous and how it was achieved. You're going to find out that the idea for AA did not come from Bill Wilson and Dr. Bob. It came from a psychiatrist. And these pages are going to tell you how and why. Now the man that they're talking about here, the certain American businessman, is Roland Hazard, a millionaire in the 30s. A very wealthy man who never went to an AA meeting and died in 1948 sober, but he was part of the Oxford movement. He's the one who carried the message to Ebby Thatcher, and Ebby brought it to Bill Wilson. Let's read this. A certain American businessman had ability, good sense, and high character. He was a lot like me. For years he had floundered from one sanitarium to another. What are they telling you? Anything that was not a hospital in those days was considered a sanitarium or an asylum. So this little unit that we're going through right now, if anybody says, where were you for 4 days, say you were down to the Jesuit Retreat House Asylum. It's not a hospital. And that's what they refer to sanitarium. He floundered from one sanitarium to another. You know what they're telling you here? He went from one treatment center to another. This guy's got money. He's going for treatment for alcoholism. He consulted the best-known American psychiatrist. In other words, they're telling you psychiatry was here before AA. Then he had gone to Europe. You know this guy had money. The only way you can go to Europe at the time was by boat. There was no airplane trips. By boat, that was a trip. You had to have money. He's in the midst of the Depression. He went to Europe, placing himself in the care of a celebrated physician, the psychiatrist Dr. Carl Jung, who prescribed for him. Though experience had made him skeptical, he finished his treatment with unusual confidence. His physical and mental condition were unusually good. Underline this. Above all, he believed he had acquired such a profound knowledge of the inner workings of its mind and its hidden springs that relapse was unthinkable. Nevertheless, he was drunk in a short time. More baffling still, he could give himself no satisfactory explanation for his fall. What did that tell you? He learned the inner workings of his mind so well he believed relapse unthinkable. That's exactly what treatment centers are trying to tell you today. You have to learn what made you an alcoholic. You have to know what's going to relapse symptoms are and all this other stuff. And when you learn to know yourself, you're not going to drink anymore. From the very beginning, this is what was tried in rehab. It was unsuccessful. He's drunk again. Now, you know this guy's got more money now. He goes back to Europe. So he returns to the doctor whom he admired and asks him point blank why he could not recover. He wished above all things to regain self-control. He seemed quite rational, well-balanced with respect to other problems, yet he had no control over alcohol. Why was this? He begged the doctor, the world's most renowned psychiatrist. Anything that's done in psychotherapy today, psychoanalysis, is done through the efforts of Carl Jung. They call them the Jungian theories. He broke away from Sigmund Freud, who believed everything was the subconscious and sex. Carl Jung set up his Scone School of Thought, which is used today. This guy's getting it right from the horse's mouth. He begged the doctor to tell him the whole truth, and he got it. And here's what the world's most renowned psychiatrist thought of alcoholics at that time. In the doctor's judgment, he was utterly hopeless. Psychiatry wasn't going to work for him. He could never regain his position in society, and he would have to place himself under lock and key or hire a bodyguard if he expected to live long. That was a great physician's opinion. But this man still lives and is a free man. He does not need a bodyguard, nor is he confined. He can go anywhere on this earth where other free men may go without disaster, provided he remains willing to maintain a certain simple attitude. Some of our alcoholic readers may think they can do without spiritual help. Let us tell you the rest of the conversation our friend had with his doctor. The doctor said, you have the mind of a chronic alcoholic. What's chronic? It keeps reoccurring. If your relapses and your drinking bouts and your drug addiction bouts keep reoccurring, that's chronic. You need something to help you. You can't do it yourself. I have never seen one single case recover where the state of mind existed to the extent that it does in you. Remember? The mental obsession, the state of mind. A psychic change is necessary. The psychic change is brought about by what? A spiritual experience or awakening. Our friend felt as though the gates of hell had closed on him with a clang, and he says to the doctor, is there no exception? In other words, Roland Hazard is saying to Carl Jung, you mean I'm doomed to die? There's nothing left for me to do here. I can't recover. And in one paragraph, Carl Jung states what's necessary for the alcoholics of the future to recover. This is probably the most potent paragraph in the whole book of AA. And here's what he says. Yes, replied the doctor. There is. Exceptions to cases such as yours have been occurring since early times. In other words, even before AA, some alcoholics have been recovering. Here and there, once in a while, alcoholics have what are called what? Vital spiritual experiences. That's how they recover. To me, these occurrences are phenomena. The doctor says, I don't understand them. They appear to be in the nature of huge emotional displacements and rearrangements. Ideas, what's that? That's your thinking. Emotions, what are those? Your feelings. And attitudes, your actions. In other words, your thinking, your feelings, and your actions, which were once the guiding forces of the lives of these men, are suddenly cast to one side. And a completely new set of conceptions and motives begins to dominate them. How? Through attending AA meetings? No. Through a vital spiritual experience. In fact, I've been trying to produce some such emotional rearrangements within you. With many individuals, the methods which I employed are successful, but I have never been successful with an alcoholic of your description. What kind of description was he? Chronic. The psychiatrist is saying chronic alcoholics, it does not seem to work with psychiatry, and we cannot get treatment centers to accept that fact today. We can't get them. They want to treat us mentally. They want to make it a secondary diagnosis. It's not so. Everything, any seminar I go to always tells me that mental health has been highly unsuccessful in working with alcoholics, yet we keep spending the money with psychiatric programs. 5% of the population of alcoholics need more than AA. Upon hearing this, our friend was somewhat relieved, and he reflected that after all he was a good church member. This hope, however, was destroyed by the doctors telling him that while his religious convictions were very good, in his case did not spell the necessary vital spiritual experience. Here was a terrible dilemma in which our friend found himself when he had the extraordinary experience which, as we have already told you, made him a free man. We, in our turn, sought the same escape with all the desperation of drowning men. What seemed at first a flimsy reed has proved to be the loving and powerful hand of God. A new life has been given us, if you prefer, a design for living that really works. The distinguished American psychologist William James, in his book Varieties of Religious Experience, indicates a multitude of ways in which men have discovered God. We have no desire to convince anyone that there is only one way by which faith can be acquired. If what we have learned and felt and seen means anything at all, it means that all of us, whatever our race, creed, or color, are the children of a living Creator with whom we may form a relationship upon simple and understandable terms as soon as we are willing and honest enough to try. Those having religious affiliations will find there nothing disturbing to their beliefs or ceremonies. There's no friction among us over any such matters. And I want to tell you something. If a man has enough guts to stand up behind a podium and tell somebody that a rock is his higher power or a coffee cup is his higher power, he should have no shame in standing up before a group of people and saying that Christ was his higher power, or Muhammad, or Buddha. To have a real God and to be ashamed to speak of it when somebody can speak of a rock or a table or something's wrong. Your higher power is your higher power, and you're entitled to tell people what it is. But one thing, AA, if you want to do a disservice to it, don't you ever stand up and say AA is my religion. You do a disservice to the founders of AA when you say that. AA was never meant to be a religion. Don't confuse that. We think it no concern of ours what religious bodies our members identify themselves with as individuals. It should be an entirely personal affair with each one decides for himself in the light of past associations of his present choice. Remember the individuality of the program, Tom? It's telling you that again. That's the individual part of this program. Not all of us join religious bodies, but most of us favor such relationships. I told my sponsor the church is full of hypocrites because he wanted me to go back. I said, church is full of hypocrites. He said, room for one more, why don't you go? You know, I know all organized religion is after is your money. He said, I'm quite sure you haven't given them any of yours, Bill. I never did. I was always complaining about organized religion after my money, and I never gave them any. The people given never complained. In the following chapter, there appears an explanation of alcoholism as we understand it. Then a chapter addressed to the agnostic. Many who once were in this class are now among our members. Surprisingly enough, we find such convictions no great obstacle for a spiritual experience. Further on, clear-cut directions, not suggestions. Further on, clear-cut directions are given showing how we recovered. These are followed by 43 personal experiences. Now, in these personal experiences, listen to what they demonstrate. Each individual in the personal stories describes in his own language and from his own point of view the way he established his relationship with God. Not the way he got sober, the way he established his relationship with God. These give a fair cross-section of our membership and a clear-cut idea of what actually happened in our lives. We hope no one will consider these self-revealing accounts in bad taste. Our hope is that many alcoholic men and women desperately in need will see these pages, and we believe that it is only by fully disclosing ourselves and our problems that we will be persuaded to say, yes, I am one of them too. I must have this thing. Now, we're going to take a break here for about 15 or 20 minutes. We're going to come back in and do more about alcoholism. The chapter more about alcoholism is a group of stories describing how people have tried to quit drinking. They're going to demonstrate how it was necessary to find a solution through God. All right? And what we want to understand here is these first 4 chapters, again, are dealing with only steps 1 and 2. When you get into steps 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12, you're going to be amazed at how simple the process is going to be. You're going to be amazed at it. You're going to find out a lot of what you're hearing in AA is misinformation. Most of us have been unwilling to admit we were real alcoholics. Why did they use the word real alcoholics? Because that means that we have to go through the whole process now. No person likes to think he is bodily and mentally different from his fellows. Therefore, it is not surprising that our drinking careers have been characterized by countless vain attempts to prove we could drink like other people. The idea that somehow, someday he will enjoy his drinking is the great obsession of every abnormal drinker. See, we're not normal, we're abnormal. The persistence of this illusion, that's this idea, is astonishing. Many pursue it into the gates of insanity or death. We learned that we had to fully concede to our innermost selves that we were alcoholics. This is the first step in recovery. What's the first step in recovery? That we're real alcoholics. There's no way we can do it without the program. The delusion that we are like other people or presently may be has to be smashed. That's acceptance of the second step. Came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. We needed a power greater than ourselves. We can't do it alone. We alcoholics are men and women who have lost the ability to control our drinking. We know that no real alcoholic ever recovers control. You know what they're saying in there? Once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. All of us felt at times we were regaining control, but such intervals, usually brief, were inevitably followed by still less control, which led in time to pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. We are convinced to a man that alcoholics of our type are in the grip of a progressive illness. Over any considerable period we get worse, never better. You know, it says intervals, usually brief, we can control our drinking. Some alcoholics will come to AA and they'll listen to this concept about the first drink. And they'll say, well, a first drink, I've gone out and taken a first drink. I've gone out several times and not gotten drunk. I'm not an alcoholic. I've been able to control it sometimes. And that may be true, because it depends on what stage of alcoholism you're in. If you're in the early stages, you may be able to do that. You may be able to go out 15 times and drink. But the 16th time, what happens? As the progression goes on, you find out now, instead of going out 15 times before you get drunk and lose control, you only go out 10 times. And then it becomes 5 times. And then as the disease broadens, you find out now maybe every time you're going out you take a drink. But not all alcoholics are on the same level of alcoholism at the same time. That's what makes it confusing. It's a progressive illness. Some guys, I know in one case in particular, a friend of mine who's since passed away, he went to a meeting and he kept hearing about this: if you take the first drink, you'll get drunk. So he stayed sober for 1 year, this magical year everybody talks about, and he gave his first lead. And after his first lead, he walked out of the meeting hall, went across to a place called the D&L Tavern. He had 1 shot and 1 beer, and he went home. And he didn't drink anymore. And he laid in bed and he thought to himself, these guys don't know what they're talking about. They said I can't do this. Next week he went to that meeting, his home group meeting, stayed for the meeting, walked out the back door, went to the D&L Tavern, had a shot and a beer, and went home. These guys really don't know what they're talking about now. And he did that 3 or 4 times. After the 4th time, he went to the Slovak Club, went inside, and come out for 2 days. See, you're able to do it short periods of time, all right? But the consistency isn't there. You can't do it consistently. Somewhere along the line, you lose track of it. You have to be aware of that. There's some people who are not in the advanced stages of alcoholism yet. We are like men who have lost their legs. They never grow new ones. Neither does there appear to be any kind of treatment which will make alcoholics of our kind like other men. We have tried every imaginable remedy. In some instances, there has been brief recovery, followed always by a still worse relapse. Physicians who are familiar with alcoholism agree there is no such thing as making a normal drinker out of an alcoholic. Science may one day accomplish this, but it hasn't done so yet. How many of you were around when they were talking about this plant that came out? You eat this plant and it was supposed to get rid of the alcohol in your system and you were going to get drunk? Now let's listen to the insanity of this. We drink because we like the effect, right? We don't drink because of the taste. If I drank alcohol and I didn't get an effect from it, you think I would drink it? The last 6 men I have put in Stella Maris detox unit started drinking, who were sober for a while, on non-alcoholic beer. They started drinking non-alcoholic beer. 6 guys I put in there so far. All right? Now, a guy who says, I'm drinking almost beer, makes about as much sense as a guy who says, I'm going to see a dealer and I'm going to buy some almost cocaine. Why would a guy want almost cocaine? See, if you go to the extreme, as you can see the nonsense in it. I don't buy beers. Like I told you, lemonade. I don't drink 24 bottles of lemonade. Why would I want to drink 24 glasses of almost beer? I get no effect from it. I would quench my thirst and quit. But these guys, psychologically, they don't get that effect. And they think, well, this may settle my nervous condition or whatever they think's happening to them. What happens to them? They have to go to the booze. It doesn't work. A higher power is still the best remedy. Despite all that men can say, many who are real alcoholics are not going to believe they are in that class. By every form of self-deception and experimentation, they will try to prove to themselves exceptions to the rule, therefore non-alcoholic. If anyone who is showing inability to control his drinking can do the right about face and drink like a gentleman, our hats are off to him. Heaven knows we have tried hard enough and long enough to drink like other people. Here are some of the methods we have tried. drinking beer only. Did any of you try that? Well, this chapter's pertaining to you then. You're in the right place. Limiting the number of drinks. I'm only going to drink 6. All right? Never drinking alone. Never drinking in the morning. Drinking only at home. Never having it in the house. Never drinking during business hours. Drinking only at parties. Switching from scotch to brandy. Drinking only natural wines. Agreeing to resign if ever drunk on a job. Taking a trip. Not taking a trip. Swearing off forever, with and without a solemn oath. I did that. Taking more physical exercise, reading inspirational books, going to health farms and sanitariums, accepting voluntary commitment to asylums. That's treatment centers. We could increase the list ad infinitum. That means we can keep going on with these things. Now, here comes the test. Here comes Alcoholics Anonymous by the founder's suggestion to people who don't believe they're alcoholic. We do not like to pronounce any individual alcoholic, but you can quickly diagnose yourself. Step over to the nearest bar room and try some controlled drinking. Try to drink and stop abruptly. Try it more than once. It will not take long for you to decide if you are honest with yourself about it. It may be worth a bad case of jitters if you get a full knowledge of your condition. How do you find out if you're alcoholic? You take the test. There's not a person sitting in this room that I have any doubts about that has to take the test. I think you failed the test long enough. You've got to try the recovery now. See, if you have ever tried to quit drinking and lost control when you started again, you're in the right place. I kept trying to define alcoholism. I kept saying to my sponsor, every day I had a different definition for alcoholism. Finally got tired of it. He said, Bill, do you want to know what alcoholism is? I said, yes. He said, go home and look in the mirror. You'll see one. Though there's no way of proving it, we believe that early in our drinking careers, most of us could have stopped drinking. But the difficulty is that few alcoholics have enough desire to stop while there is yet time. We have heard of a few instances where people who show definite signs of alcoholism were able to stop for a long period of time because of an overpowering desire to do so. Here is one. Now they're going to give a demonstration, a classic example of a man who had an overpowering desire to stop drinking. We're going to look at his case history and see what happened to him, and then we're going to explain that to you and bring some other examples out beside. A man of 30 was doing a great deal of spree drinking. He was very nervous in the morning after these bouts and quieted himself with more liquor. He was ambitious to succeed in business, but saw that he could get nowhere if he drank at all. Once he started, he had no control whatever. He made up his mind that until he had been successful in business and had retired, he would not touch another drop. An exceptional man, he remained bone dry for 25 years and retired at the age of 55 after a successful and happy business career. Then he fell victim to a belief which practically every alcoholic has, that his long period of sobriety and self-discipline had qualified him to drink as other men. Out came his carpet slippers and a bottle. In 2 months he was in a hospital, puzzled and humiliated. He tried to regulate his drinking for a while, making several trips to the hospital meantime. Then, gathering all his forces, he attempted to stop altogether and found he could not. Every means of solving the drink problem, which money could buy, was at his disposal. Every attempt failed. Though a robust man at retirement, he went to pieces quickly and was dead within 4 years. This case contains a powerful lesson. Most of us have believed if we remained sober for a long stretch, we could thereafter drink normally. But here's a man who had 55 years, found he was just where he had left off at 30. We have seen the truth demonstrated again and again. Once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. Commencing to drink after a period of sobriety where in a short time as bad as ever. If we are planning to stop drinking, there must be no reservation of any kind, nor any lurking notion that someday we will be a